6:34, and I'm calling the meeting of the Planning Board for May 19th to order. So we'll begin with the roll call. And John, I am here. Rebecca?
I'm here.
Phil is excused. Neil is not present. Mike, I believe, is still excused. Mark?
Here.
Susan?
Here.
And then our alternates, Zach of the Select Board, Mike Bouchard, Peter, and Guy. And those last three are excused. And there's no alternates, right, to seat? No. Okay. So we'll begin with the review of minutes of April 21st, of which you should all have a copy. So have a look, and do we see any changes or?
Yes.
Yes?
My guess is the people who were present was copied and pasted from the previous meeting, which I think or several meetings ago. I'm not on there. Phil is listed as vice chair. John, you should be chair. I was definitely there. I am vice chair. And then beyond that, I'm not sure who else was in attendance. And I mean, you can tell I was there because I made a motion. And I guess that's good for us because then we can actually vote on these minutes because I think all of us were present for this meeting.
Yes.
At least according to what's written here. Minus
I
me.
wasn't.
You were not there? So anyway, there's some edits, but I don't think we can vote on them.
So we don't have a quorum of present members from the meeting?
It's probably best practice to wait till you have a quorum
Yeah.
of those members present.
Okay.
You should abstain if you weren't there, so.
All right. So we will, I guess, table these till the next meeting, and but noted about the members. Right. So we also had minutes from our May 5th meeting, and Mark, you were not present. Is that correct?
Well, it says he was, but it also says he was excused.
Yes. Oh.
Oh, yeah. We'll be a little more careful.
Sorry, I'm trying to give you a hard time.
I guess we'll also table these until the next meeting.
Yeah, a stack of minutes.
All right, so 3 meeting minutes for the next meeting. All right. So have there been any communications received, June?
Yes. So on the table, one of the piles there is a two-sided sheet that I just did want to share with the board that was handed to me at the start of our meeting on the 5th, and it came from Frank Miller. It was just about, he had some thoughts about the village commercial zone and leading up to our walk that we did that night downtown. So we had a little bit of discussion about this before, about what we think of sort of our geographic area of downtown. There is actually a part of it that's zoned agricultural, which is on the east side of the railroad tracks, down by the wastewater treatment plant and Plymouth, the highway garage, boat launch, amphitheater, that area. And so I think what's being kind of pointed out is, what the agricultural uses are, is that sort of appropriate there. We took another look at that zone, and while it isn't really agriculture, but south of there is sort of a forested floodplain area that was unlikely because of floods issues. It would never get developed, can't imagine. So I think it's probably fine to leave it as is. There's nothing, if we tried to change it, we could end up with more conflicts later. So I don't see any major problems with what's there, because we do allow, civic uses in the agricultural zone. So we wouldn't want to change it to something that's non-conforming. based on the wastewater treatment plant, highway garage, that kind of, those are really the two main uses in terms of structures.
If I could add to that,
Yeah.
looking at that little finger that comes north along the river there between and the train tracks, I was looking at the landowners there,
Yeah.
and it's the state of New Hampshire for the courthouse, it's the water and sewer, and it's Plymouth.
Yeah,
And that's pretty much all the land in that strip.
right.
And I don't think any one of those owners would necessarily be ripe for development, and it's really changing fundamentally our uses.
Yeah,
uses
and
there.
state doesn't follow our local zoning anyway, so.
Yeah.
And the town doesn't have to follow its own local, so. And the wastewater treatment plant isn't moving anytime soon.
Yeah.
So, anyway. So I just wanted to share that, so you had that information and just kind of address it, so. All right?
All right.
And the public can petition us for a rezone or something like that if they wanted to. So if it's not something we take on, then that's something that,
And if there are more issues to come out of this, we will be talking about our walk later and our thoughts about the village commercial zone, and it could potentially,
I guess the last piece, on the second page of it, where there's sort of a list of different types of classifications of industry uses, that we don't use that. Our zoning ordinance is what we go by in terms of land use. So we can list within any zone, with approval at town meeting, what's permitted by special exception, or what's not permitted. So while you may have these classifications, it doesn't really matter. We go by what this says, so.
I think if we've talked about this too, as we're discussing zoning and trying to determine, when we were, several years ago, almost names on the zones is misleading and gets confusing, and that just because it's called agriculture doesn't mean that's the only place, that's what is the only thing that happens there. In some ways, it would be better if we gave them like letters or numbers or something like that, because it does get confusing.
right. So it looks like up next we have several applications. Our first application on the agenda is from New Car, and I believe we do not have any new information from them. So I will, we have a continuation of our public meeting or public hearing from our previous meeting of a month ago, and I will reopen that public hearing at 6:42. And so I will simply just state, as we were talking about a moment ago, as far as the clock goes, we have 65 days to review this application. We've been asked to continue this meeting again to our next full meeting, which would put us at around 56 days. So we're still within that time frame, assuming everything gets taken care of on the, what date is that?
June
The
16th.
of June. Are there any other comments? Well,
Do you need a motion, or do we just continue the hearing?
You can just continue the hearing, and you can ask if anybody has any comments.
are there any comments from the public? No? Okay. So in that case, it is 6:43, and we will continue this hearing until June 16th. All right, so our next application is for a subdivision. And I can just pull up my information here. So we have a subdivision in the industrial commercial zone at 1 Boulder Point Drive, and it is PID number 213-002-000. The applicant is Kevin French, and this is for a subdivision of a 2.21 acre parcel into 3 new lots. And looks like we're getting set up here. So the applicant would like to tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, and I have large plans if you want.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know.
Already did.
Yeah. Oh, it is this way.
Okay, this is the 2.21 acre at the corner of Boulder Point Road and Penny Mountain Highway. This is the existing Aroma Joe's, and this is the proposed Rap City, which I think there is a conditional site plan approval pending on that. So I've shown that on here just to show how it relates to proposed lot lines. They would be, all 3 lots front on Boulder Point Road. Of course, Aroma Joe's fronts on Penny Mountain Highway also, but the access is off Boulder Point Drive. Aroma Joe's and Rap City would be sharing the existing driveway that comes in. The property line would basically go down the center of that existing road and then kind of bisect the wet area that's between those two, the existing building and the proposed building. I got the notice, we did recheck the lot coverage, and I have a blow up of those 2 things, but the lot coverage is 50% on one lot and 40% on the second lot. I do have a note on that there, the proposed water line from the Rap City lot, parcel would go across and part of the front lot, which is Aroma Joe's. I have it referenced on here that there are cross easements for drainage, for access, and utilities. And a lot of those will be addressed in the when they do the conveyances in terms of, because there will be things on. I'm not sure now at this point what the who's going to be responsible for what percentage of what. And so basically what we're doing is we're creating 2 lots that handle both of those uses, and then the remaining lot is kind of naturally split. There's a wet area that comes across most of the whole lot, and the uplands portion of that backs up towards the property that's Tractor Supply. There is a vacant lot here, but Tractor Supply says all the lots will be connected to town services, water and sewer. And if anybody has any questions, it's kind of a straightforward. Like I said, there's a lot on here, but basically we're just looking at the subdivision. A lot of that other stuff with the site plan and the site plan process.
Thank you very much. So our first task is to determine whether the application is complete. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
I have a question. What's the slope of the non-wetland area, roughly, of the 1.01 acre parcel?
This parcel?
Yeah.
It's between 8 and 15%.
Any other questions or comments?
I'd make a motion to approve, or to accept the application as complete.
Second.
So we have a motion to accept the application as complete. Are there any other questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. So the application is accepted as complete. So, moving on to approval. So do we have further questions or comments?
I have a
Yeah,
question.
go ahead.
I see that we have a note here in the planner report to just confirm that, we're not making lots with the Aroma Joe's, which is an existing development, and Rap City, which is a proposed development, that they don't exceed the, 75% impervious surface on the new lots. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Did you do an assessment of wetland functions?
Pardon me?
Did you do an assessment of wetland functions?
Well, they were delineated, and I do believe that they are what we would originally call a hydrant B type of wetlands.
Poorly drained?
Yeah, poorly drained, not hydrant A or very poorly drained.
Was this forested?
Some of this,
Had it been forested?
had it been forested, well, at one time it was. This lot is mostly forested now. This one is probably half. The wetlands area is forested.
So we also have a shared driveway.
Yes.
Is there a proposal for an easement or something for the shared driveway?
Yes, there will be, there is, again, that's there will be easements for that use, and in that, there are going to be conditions on maintenance and management, and who takes care of what, who's responsible for which of those things.
Okay.
And I'm not sure at this time, I could ask if it's a 50-50 thing, or?
Probably.
Yeah,
I
okay.
would say probably, yes.
Yeah,
You have other questions or comments?
These are just sketches, or actually areas that I did of each lot that will show the impervious
Okay.
on them.
Thank you.
I don't know those, if you watch those, but
It's kind of hard to eyeball.
it is. Well, the other thing that's kind of deceiving is the setback area always gives you a lot more, gives you the most area. In fact, a lot of times, if you didn't do anything in the setback, you would pretty much satisfy the 75% lot coverage.
Don't forget a public hearing.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So it is 6:53, and I will open the public hearing. Does the public have any comments on this application? Okay. It is still 6:53, and I will close the public hearing.
I didn't see anybody online either asking, so.
Okay. Are we ready for a motion, or are there further questions or concerns?
I guess I'm wondering if we have we've got just looking at the stuff that in the planner report, so, were there comments from the Water and Sewer District?
Yes, and that Joseph had it on the departmental review on the first page.
Oh,
so,
sorry. Okay, yep, I see.
So there needed to be some, and I think Kevin said you changed, you specified where it is now in the new plan?
It was on the
Yeah.
plan, that
Okay.
their water line,
Okay, so that's good.
the light, magenta line, where the proposed water line is, that connect to Rock City.
And you're showing where it is onto the Roma Joe's?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it comes down, it
Yeah.
actually, it leaves here and comes down across, and connects down to
Okay.
down across the corner of Roman Joe's,
Yep.
across that front line.
So you've added that since,
It was already on, it's right,
Okay.
it's this line right here.
okay.
It's in the legend, it's water line, it shows. And that was from the site plan that was done by Du Bois and King.
So it looks like most of the things that, or all the things that that's recommended that we put in as conditions have been taken care of, except we might need to mention the driveway easement.
Yeah. I think just asking, clarifying that we see those easements before signing the final plan and getting it recorded.
So I guess unless someone else wants to do it. Spent 5 years not making motions. I make a motion that we approve this application with the condition that the driveway easement is on the final plan before it's signed.
Second.
Is there any,
Set a date for getting
Yes.
that done. I'm looking at the calendar here.
I'd be happy to amend my motion if someone else can choose an appropriate date.
You might want to ask the applicant what an appropriate date might be.
What's that?
How long would it take to get the easements?
Well, I guess my question is, would you rather see it in the, like in the draft conveyance? Because that kind of tells more about what the easement actually would be.
Yeah. And then maybe put on a note on the plan that says it's subject to easements for,
Right, I do have a note on here now that
Yeah.
says that there will be cross easements
Okay.
for access, drainage, and utilities.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And again, the wording of that and the responsibility of it is something that's done more in terms of the conveyances when they actually, the conditions of the conveyance, of the covenants, things like that, so.
So it sounds like maybe we can just remove that condition altogether
It doesn't
since
need,
it's
it doesn't need to be on the plan.
on there.
Because the
it's
conveyance.
got the note on the plan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I wanted, on the plan for the subdivision, I wanted to bring notice to the fact that they had to have easements for all of those things. So when they look at it, they know, okay, when this is conveyed, those things have to be addressed. Basically, if we're gonna give an easement to the road, it's gonna be over the road that's there now.
June, do you think that satisfies our need for record keeping and making sure everything is as detailed as it ought to be?
I would suggest seeing a draft of the conveyances. I think that would be good, at least, making sure that that's done, and then we know it's, there, and it's been worked on. And if you can ask for maybe 30 days, or how long, whatever, 60 days?
Yeah. 30 days. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to amend my motion to say to get a draft of the conveyances in 30 days.
Second.
okay, further discussion? All those in favor of this motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the application is approved. Thank you very much.
Just getting that out of the way. I didn't mean to be so dramatic about it.
For your records?
All right.
Kevin, would
I
you
thought
like
it would
this for your
land
records?
gently behind me.
And
If you don't want.
I have a small copy.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along.
I always think they're going to like the recycling bin, but I forget that they actually might be needed.
So he's requested if we could pull up Google Maps on the TV. Google Maps.
Maps, yes.
Or just of the aerial.
okay. So we have one more application, which is a site plan review application in the agricultural zone. And the applicant is Ankit Patel, and the PID is number 223028 at 3112 Mayhew Turnpike. And the request is to construct an approximately 2,200 square foot addition to the northern face of an existing, the existing Tenny Mountain Country Store. Welcome.
Yes.
If you'd like to say a few words.
Yeah, so this current plan that it is right now on there was approved back in 2007. We just want to add about a 2,250 by 55 by 40 on the north side of the store, getting to the existing same building to it, not anything smaller or bigger, so it will just go along with the building the way we have. I'm not an expert on a lot of wording in a way of explaining it, but I'll try to explain it as simple possible way I can. Neither I'm a contractor or a drawing picture or anything it is, but the basic way it is. If you want to pull up the Google Maps, for
Just give me a
so
second,
way
yeah.
there, I can walk through with it.
Is that right?
Yeah, and then you just click on this little guy, I guess. Yep, and then just drop it right by the store. Yep. Yep.
There you go.
There you go. That would be perfect. Okay, so basically what we are doing is we are going up to this line straight about a 2,200 square feet to the existing building, and it will be accessed by one door. People can go from either this side or that side, so it's both has a, this already has two doors, one entry and exit. This would have an entry door, since we don't require to have two exit doors, we just have to have one. There will be no plumbing, there will be no anything addition to it, just basically electrical and just a square box building to it. The reason why we need that portion for it, because the small store by itself is too small, continuous inside being adding the coolers and the way we have right now. We can, and we are up way further from this side of the road that people go up and along with the main road, so it's not blocking it. There is no signage will go on, there is no anything. It is, if any signage will go on, we'll do another permit at the time of the application next time. At this point there is no plan for putting it any addition sign or anything inside, and everything else beside there will stay. I know the town did had a question in regard to the parking space. So back in 2007, when the contractor had proposed, there was a basically so this was a parking space will be out. This is where the building is going in a way on that side. So when they proposed it, there was a 3 parking space was here. Question for town was basically where that 3 parking space will go. We can easily move those 3 parking spaces over here. The reason, the type of the business we are in, We're not a restaurant, neither we are people there staying in. It's basically in and out. It's one person comes, one, two per people go. We don't need it 15 or 20 parking space for people to park and come inside and go, because the gas pump has already 4 parking space, people to pump on it, plus additional 7 on the side. And I think that is pretty enough for us. But I know that town does require, depends on the square feet, it needs to be have it, but we can accommodate those on the other side.
So I had a separate question, actually. So I'm looking at the picture on the screen there.
Yeah.
So is that a second-story access?
No.
What is that back there?
So that's the stairs, and that is been put it in because there's only second story access is you could go from here as well, and we do have it in the back.
Mm-hmm.
So that back is the one we mainly use it to go up and down. If they do require a second door to access it, we can move this same exact way. We just turn around the stairs on. Rather than going this way, it will go other side.
Okay.
Depends on the fire marshal and other town people. If they permit it, say just change the door, we can just change the door.
Okay, thank you. So the first thing we need to do is figure out whether or not we're going to accept the application as complete before we discuss approval. So are there any questions or comments from the board about the completeness of this application? It is a little less fully filled out than some of our applications.
Yeah, so we're not seeing the same level of detail that we often see and that we do require with, you know, certain things. You know, sketch of the site with existing natural, I mean, is this the only thing we have?
Yeah, this and there was one other
There's
drawing.
one other one from the,
Oh, it was
The tax card.
Yeah, which is not the site, yeah.
The version we did get was bigger than,
Yeah.
but the let me, I can do a screen share in this.
and I'm bringing this up because I think it's important to acknowledge, but I recognize that, as you know, this is a smaller business and doesn't have the resources to do engineering plans and things like that. And so I'm not necessarily opposed to this, but I just want to make sure we look at the things through the checklist to make sure that we're not missing any important details that we normally see when we're considering an application.
So the existing building is 2,000 square feet?
At this point, yes.
It is.
It's about 40 by 50, yes.
By 50?
Yep.
And actually, just looking at the application, it's 2,400 square feet you're trying to
So
add, right?
we are getting about 50 by 540, so it's about 22, 46.
Okay.
Roughly.
What was the size of the addition? Sorry.
55
by 40, yeah, okay.
I think it would be helpful for me to get a little, you know, a drawing with a little more context in there that has, you know, Tenny Mountain Highway. Am I seeing that? Yeah, because Tenny Mountain Highway is down here.
It's Route 3A.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
Mayhew Turnpike. Thank you. So we've got 3A there with the,
Melvin Road on the cross.
yep. Usually we're seeing butters, right? On there?
There's one a butter, well,
Is there a butter
one a
also?
butter beside, and I think another in back.
Right, but usually we're seeing them listed on the, I'm just trying to look
Yeah.
through the things that we normally see, like the elevation view. It's an existing building, as long as the addition wouldn't deviate from that, you know, I don't think that's something that's as critical for us. Is the the other site
Yeah,
plan from
so-
2007, I think just,
Answering to that question to you, reason why there's not too much in there because maybe I misunderstood it in the time that I presented, is this was supposed to be attached to that.
okay,
So this has almost each and every single detail that
Yep.
we're not changing to it.
Yep.
The only thing we put it in there is what we are changing from current to the new one.
Mhm.
That we can show
Yep.
it there, alright, if we are adding this here, then where this, you're gonna ask where this tree gonna go.
Mhm.
Then we move that and we point it out over there, that we are gonna move it to the tree on that side. But every single aspect of this map right here, it's not changing
Yep.
to a single bit.
may I look at this a little more closely?
So that was
Yep.
back in 2007 proposed plan, I guess.
Yeah, I think if this is part of it, I think that, I mean, that's part of the file anyway, so seeing this a little more
Was
closely.
Bolkar working on this?
Yes, he's
This
the one
plan?
who's the one proposing back then, I guess.
So for the rest of the board, that 2007 plan is now up on the screen there, so.
Okay. Yeah, I think this gives the detail. I mean, the only thing it's missing is the names of, the abutting property owners.
Well, on this side, there's a automotive repair facility, and behind, there's a mobile home. It's at some distance.
Right. I think it's just what's on the checklist here that needs to be on the plan, and I think we just need to make sure we're addressing all these things, so. Other people have, does anyone else wanna look at I mean, you can see it on the screen, but does anyone else wanna look at this?
You okay?
We're good, yep.
Well, there are no streams on the property, no wetlands on the property.
So in the notes, it mentions the cooler drains. You're putting new cooler boxes out in the addition?
Yes, so I have no idea. I don't think so it's required from a sewer perspective. The reason for that is currently we have a walk-in cooler in there, the condenser unit comes outside, but it's basically a gallon of water about every week or two. So it's not in a area of that you need a sewer line or portion of that to be connected to anything. I don't think so. Is any of the store does it because
So you don't have to do any floor drains or anything
no,
like that?
nothing like
'Cause
that. It
okay.
just evaporates in the air and over the time. If it's winter, then it's a little bit more portion. But it's not. No, it's not a walking of the customer or is a hazard issue for the insurance side of
Sure.
the perspective of that. It's basically a gallon of water about every 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so. Not even.
I guess just back to my original question. So the addition is actually larger than what's there currently.
Correct. About a couple hundred. Yeah.
Yeah. I just, when I looked at this drawing, it kind of makes it look quite a bit smaller.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it is about a 55, the one is 50. Yes.
There's no scale.
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah, but,
Scale is, yeah.
And you would be finishing the exterior in a similar,
Same exact color, it will flush out the same exact building. We'll try to match, the contractor will try to match it as possible as it is, because one is older color, it might be, it won't be a purple and white. Same color.
for June? Have a butters been notified? Yes, okay. Double checking.
No,
it
we hadn't
because it
received
wasn't
any
here.
comments at all, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, conceptually, I think, this is something that's a fairly easy thing for us to address, but I just want to make sure that we're getting enough detail in what we have to move forward and have, you know, adequate record keeping too. So,
You think a conditional approval might be considered?
Well, at this point, we just need to even accept the application.
I know.
Yeah, but.
I'm
yeah.
looking down the,
I mean, yeah, so I think we have to talk about the completeness, because what we're missing on the plan kind of address, I mean, I'd be willing to make a motion to accept this application as complete under the understanding that we're gonna need more detail to, can we even do that? Does that make sense? I mean, there's missing things from here, but do we have enough information to move forward? So I guess
Is that a motion? Or?
no, that was just babbling.
maybe it could be a conditional acceptance.
You either
No, I
accept
think
it or
it-
you
yeah.
don't.
No.
So
Yeah.
I would suggest that you accept it, and then ask for revisions at the end, because if you feel like you have enough of an understanding, and then for clarity in the file, if you get to that point after the public hearing, you could ask for some additional details about the scale. And, you know, if you feel like the explanation's been given to satisfy what you need to make a decision on it, you know, after hearing,
And there will be a permitting process still for the building itself.
correct, yeah.
Well,
We'll have
I think one of the biggest things might be the scale and the plan and
Yeah.
just a
Fire.
better title. And attaching it to the other one
Mm-hmm.
does help. We did have that in the file. He just didn't, I guess we did have a bit of a mix-up
Yeah.
of, he thought we already had it, so rather than including it with the application, but, does that help?
yes, that helps. Then I would like to make a motion to accept this application as complete.
Second, Susan got it.
All right, is there any
Close.
further discussion? Okay. All those who approve?
Aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
Sorry, I didn't say aye, but I meant to say aye. That I accept, I approve the motion.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, approve the acceptance, sorry.
I was thinking about
Um,
that.
To accept the application as complete. So, I think we're, just to be sure, all those in favor of accepting the application as complete?
Aye.
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 Okay, aye. And opposed? Abstentions? Make sure we get the language right. All right, so moving on to some of the issues we were just discussing about what we'd like to see for an approval of the application. So you would like to see some more detailed drawings up?
I mean, I think this is sufficient. I mean, I would say just, trace this. I mean, having this information, this is sort of the as-built, and then, I'm just looking at the staff report here, identifying, I mean, pretty much all the information that's on here, I think it needs to be on here, and I do have a hard time with the scale and not showing the correct scale of the as-built and the proposed building. So, yeah, if you can just trace
Yeah, I
this
would,
thing and then,
rewrite
yeah.
the Same thing over there to
Yeah.
that, and, yeah.
Mhm.
Again, I said, the reason why it's because I'm understanding is neither I'm changing a building from left to a right. So what I understood in a way that when we talked about it, it's what we changing to what it is currently, it's what I have to present to the town.
Yeah.
Neither I'm changing what in that current picture it is, neither I'm changing a pump or a sign or a entry or exit or people going in and out. It's basically what we are adding to a current building that was already approved.
Yeah.
You know, that's basically what I understood. But I can revise and redraw that same exact thing and submit that to the town, no problem.
I would also be curious to address the egress on the second floor. And, because you mentioned that would probably be, it would, I mean, you would still need it as a second means of egress, and it would have to be moved then, and so to address that as well would be helpful.
Yeah,
When
the
this-
fire marshal was there on a time there, we put in application and stuff like that. again, first thing first for us was to do is get this approved and get it to the next step in order for us to even move forward with anything. Then if it is, we do have an option just to change the face of the exit is just to face it that way.
Do we get as-built when these projects are complete, when everything is, do we get those just automatically, or do we have to request those, or? The
For
file.
something like this, like we did get one for Roma Joe's, like a digital, from the contractor, because they were really mapping out where the lines went in, and cause that was an undeveloped site to a developed site. In this case, we kind of go with what the site plan says, and then there's also a building permit that comes, and then through that building process, there's a certificate of occupancy. So through that process, the changes to the actual structure would be documented through the building permit process. And if there's a real deviation and gets to be bigger or something really changes, then we can go back and modify the site plan. But as long as it's kind of, within the 55 by 40 addition and it's there, then, So I guess the answer, do we get as-built, is kind of, it depends.
When we find out about it.
Yeah, trying to do a better job. Now they're coming digital too, so.
So I think most of the stuff that we're missing from this is addressed on, the things that we've got listed in the staff report are on this building, so. Yeah. Other than that.
Any other comments from the board?
Just out of curiosity, I think I read this, the second floor of the current structure is an apartment. Is that right? Yes. Okay. So just like what John said too about that, kind of showing that second egress, I think.
Yeah, I think we talked about it in time there. We will move it phasing in the direction of what it is that's gonna be in our way of 55 by 40. We'll just change it towards the other way. But it's just in a fire exit, it's not a person who go in and out. Because we do have a second
Yeah, I see that on
entry
the
to
current.
go regular use of the building. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes, Neil?
Do you have a loading zone for deliveries?
No, it's regular front door. It's no loading zone like a Walmart or supermarket.
So you don't have a storage area?
No. So that's the reason why what we need an addition for, because everything it's in-stored in a floor on a retail space, which is where everything is been laid out. So there is no storage room in the backyard or backside or anything that would be. Basically, the space we are adding to it, it's an open square box, open space. We just have to build a box on it and continues with the store alone. So there is no storage space in this building now.
Okay. So it is 7:22, and I'm going to open the public hearing. Are there any comments from the public in person or on Zoom? Zoom? I see someone there, but
There's one person on, hold on, trying to. Let me do this.
yes.
You got a guy standing.
Just want to say it's great that a small business owner operator is literally doubling the size of his taxable income in this town, and you're choosing to do that and move forward. And thanks to the board for approving that or accepting the application. Like, you guys noticed that he's not a multi-millionaire conglomerate firm that can have engineering plans. So just thank you. Yeah.
So I saw some action on Zoom. Was there other comments there, June? You have a
Nobody's
sense?
unmuted or raised their hand that I can see.
Anyone there on Zoom wish to speak? If you do, you can unmute yourselves and speak. Okay. Oh, wait.
No, just all good. I got a video by today, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so it is 7:24, and I'm going to close the public hearing. So, members of the board, how do we feel?
I'm okay with it.
I don't see where there's any negative impact.
Yeah, I think as long as we get a little more detail in what's filed with this, the site plan review, I think, yeah, it's pretty straightforward, so.
Is there a motion?
I move that we approve this application.
Second.
Is there
Do
any
we need
further
to add,
discussion?
some conditions of, sort of officially some conditions that we want to see on the
You wanna
final?
Have it, make it conditional?
I think it would make sense to me to say that we want this, 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 and this on
Do you
the,
have a list?
that's what I was trying to get to.
Okay, go for it.
It's on that review.
We would need, the, onto the plan, we need a title, owner name, address of the site, PID information, and scale. And this is already all written out, so we can, we can give that to you.
No, I
Turn this over.
You can see, I'm gonna read this list. Identify pavement, gravel surfaces, lawn, and any landscaping on the plan. Add signage and lighting to the plan, and add dumpster location to the plan.
Yeah, I would just add to that dumpster location to the plan. I mean, again, we are going back to the same exact question as I mentioned it before. We're not changing anything what was already approved and what's already currently going, unless the town has an opposed to that dumpster location at this point where it is, then I do have to mention it that I'm changing the location for the dumpster. It's the place of the dumpster where it is right now, it will be the exact place where it's gonna stay. So, I mean, if that makes everybody in the board happy about it where it is and everything place, then yes, I can go into detail about it. Same exact with the signage of the pole, the way it is, it will be the staying the way it is, because it was already been approved. Like, the reason what I'm not understanding in my side of the way is, things that already there, it's approved, neither I'm changing it or neither I'm making a change to those approved plans already.
Well, I think what it means is when you create a new drawing,
Yeah,
it would replicate a lot of the things that are on here,
yeah,
including a better sense of scale, and including things like the dumpster is on here, in fact.
Correct.
So I think you would just transfer that over to
Okay.
your new plan, and then it would be there, if I understand correctly.
yeah, so I'll just revise the same exact one
Yeah.
to the bigger,
Mhm.
yeah.
Do we?
So
take-
would you like to revise your,
So I move that we approve this application with conditions to add the title, owner's name, address of the site, PID information, and scale to the plan, identify pavement, gravel surfaces, lawn, and any landscaping on the plan, and state that there are no changes in signage, lighting, or dumpster location.
Good. Second that.
okay, are there any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Oh, I totally spaced out.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the application is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I will submit this
Additionally
back
approved.
to
Yeah, or to us, and yeah,
Just
I'll
used to
let you
being
work
the
with
one
Joseph, because
asking
you've
for
talked
the
to him
motion.
quite a bit, so just,
Doing
yeah.
all that stuff.
Um,
And we'll send you a notice of decision.
yeah.
So I think if you just take the
Days.
old plan and put the addition
That's
just
what I'm
on that, yeah, that kind of white out, you know,
Yeah.
Do you want,
I don't want
yeah.
to need-
just get it on scale, and then I think that'll be fine.
When
Okay,
I was
so
on
I
the,
think
Put a new
wait
date
for
and-
decision
I used
come
to
in,
look
I
at the
can
feet of the
submit
lawyers.
that.
They all wore like $2,000 loafers. And I knew
We're
I
gonna be
was
here
dealing
tomorrow.
with serious
We're gonna be out for part of the
See,
day.
whenever
in the
I see someone show up with a
afternoon,
tie, I'm like, oh, this
Either
is
in the morning or
meeting.
next week.
Three-piece suit and a diamond ring.
And just make sure you, what we'd also like to see is that, like, your name, date,
Bow tie.
you know, May 2022 on the, yeah.
Bow
on-
tie, it's like,
using the
you know,
old plan, but just updated
knows
with
what's gonna
new
happen.
information,
Colorful
you
bow
know.
tie.
We have, again, with our records, so we open it up for this file, we see what's there. Okay,
All right.
understand,
Thank
we
you
don't have to keep
Thank
adding
you very
in.
much.
Sorry
Thank
for
you
the
much.
confusion. Yep.
Oh, that was a smooth meeting, huh?
Whatever yet.
So, June, are there any informational or pre-application reviews?
Nope.
Okay, so other business, let's see, for members of the board and planning staff, our downtown walk. So, I think we had a pretty productive downtown walk and discussed quite a bit about the character of downtown, the historical, current, and potential scale of development downtown, and I think some of the issues of the grade of the east side of the Village Commercial and what that does for the heights of structures on the Main Street side versus the east side of a lot of structures there in terms of including our current zoning of 35 feet. And there was talk about that whole stretch down there going towards the train tracks and what could potentially happen there. And yeah, discussions of our current zoning ordinance, of the unit limits on residential dwellings, among other things. And I guess the next question would be, you know, where do we want to go from here? I mean, it was a pretty informative walk, I think, and it's really helpful to get that firsthand look at. I think it's easy to overlook an existing development and not really see what it could be, and I think we talked about a lot of that in our walk. And so, what are the next steps? I mean, do we want to address our zoning, and do we want to address, as we tried last year, dwelling unit numbers, or anything else? I mean, I guess I'm wondering what anyone else's takeaways were from this walk.
I have one thing. I'd like to see the board consider increasing the height in the zoning regulations of commercial buildings.
Okay. There was quite a bit of talk about height, and the fact that, you know, on the backside of a lot of these buildings on Main, they're quite a bit more than 35.
I think, I agree. I think we also need to, we can't really think about that without thinking about parking, depending on what's gonna be happening. If we did allow for vertical development in town, I think we'd just be making a problem that we already have worse without really thinking about if they're gonna be residential units or businesses or what, we're already packed with parking, so.
I think it would be good to have a full discussion.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, and it's an interesting discussion there because, I mean, the zoning part is, you know, hours to talk about at this point. Parking is not something we can really address necessarily very directly on the zoning board, or in the planning board, sorry. And so there are a bunch of moving pieces that would need to be coordinated. Yeah, so, I mean, I was, you know, giving this some thought, and, I mean, there's a few issues that come to mind. There was, I mean, there are things that can happen within the zoning to make slight changes that would address some of these issues. One of the issues seems to be that what we ask for on Main is not necessarily what we want to see everywhere else, and including, you know, residential, perhaps on the ground floor. Including the height limit even. I mean, one would even wonder, 35 on Main, more elsewhere, which would allow for a larger rear of the building. I mean, I think right now, according to the zoning ordinance, we measure height from the average height of the finished ground level, which puts Main below 35 in many cases. And then there's been some talk as well about going a different route, which is more form-based code and design, which I don't know if June or Joseph, you want to mention at all.
I guess I haven't got my head wrapped around exactly what I'd want to say about that. I don't know if you guys know much about form-based codes, but within a zoning ordinance, it's an approach that, rather than just setting specific parameters like traditional zoning does, it's often used like especially in downtown areas, where you find a way to have some parameters on how a development or change of a development would look in the context of where it sits. So rather than saying front setback has to be 15 feet, you would look at what are the setbacks on either side, and you have it aligned with that same amount. So if on either side it's 15 feet, you want it to be 15 feet. So you don't have a setback that kind of is different. There's a lot of diagrams that you have to kind of go with to better explain it that I don't have called up right here. But, if the setback on either side is only 5 feet, you don't want to require someone to be set back 10 feet more and have this sort of, area, unless there was a need for that space for some reason. So it really looks at sort of the form and function of what's existing right around a proposed site for development. And you try to kind of match it in terms of height, scale, location, setbacks, that kind of thing. So every site has the opportunity to fit in form and function, basically. And so it's and it allows for some variety, as you maybe, in one spot it could be a 5-foot setback, quarter of a mile down the road it could be a 10-foot setback, depending on how things sort of change. And we do have a lot of differences on our main street. So it can be a more flexible approach that allows for developments to kind of fit in better, has kind of been the idea behind it. And it does seem to work pretty well in like our traditional downtown, because it's hard to zone to get the types of buildings that we like and see down there. And I think some of the recent developments that we did look down the housing, are kind of a box on 6 units and garages underneath. And they're in good shape, they're well maintained. I'm not, but the form, and maybe the form fits down there.
A lot of other boxes down there.
Yeah, there's other sort of boxy structures, but whereas up above on Main Street, some of the places that were more old houses have peaked roofs and a little different look to them. So it's about a way to make character and form kind of fit better.
I was going to say, just to add to that, I think it can also be a little bit more aspirational as well. In other words, not just fitting in with existing forms as they already are, not to contradict them, but in some cases also to try to reshape a bit if we're seeing certain forms not working out.
Yep.
On the other hand, you're mentioning setbacks, which, Joseph, you did a little bit of research to see how that's changed over time, and apparently it is 15 feet in the village commercial. It's a little bit unclear how it's currently in the zoning ordinance, with 0 by special exception.
Yeah.
And I mean, personally at least, that seems kind of unfortunate to me. I would like to see 0. And the setback, where it does exist, like in South Main, seems to be causing, among other things, issues, besides character issues, I think, those long stretches of non-sidewalk. Is because there's that little setback there for parking, which ends up creating difficulty.
Can I ask a couple questions about the form-based code? I guess it obviously makes sense in something like the downtown. It's not something you would want to put in the ag zone. That might be challenging in a different way. Does that put more of a sort of the planning board is reviewing things for character and determining, okay, this siding doesn't fit with the character of downtown? Or is it more the structural, okay, the setbacks, that makes sense, the height makes sense in the context of where it's where it is? That was kind of a question.
Yeah, I think there's probably an element of it could be either. There's also some of a push within it, and it doesn't have to be, but of de-emphasizing necessarily the really strictly regulating the uses, more looking at the form. So instead of saying, you can have 3 units here, you see, what's the size and form of building that fits, and then sort of saying the 3 units is kind of secondary. So if you look at sort of that sort of envelope, or if you have that building envelope that might be stepped back as you get higher, or however it might look, it's more about sort of that fitting within the envelope on the lot, I would say, and maybe also a de-emphasis of the use in some cases. Not to say there's no consideration for that, but in many communities, that's the direction they take it.
And de-emphasizing, like, in this case, the village commercial as one monolithic thing where one size fits all everywhere, and recognizing that there's a bit more flexibility there to design an overall shape, and without having to like chop it up into like 4 different zones and make life really complicated that way.
And there's always growth out on Tenny Mountain Highway. I mean, there's so much space out there as well. So I do think we definitely need to work on the zoning ordinances and how we, not necessarily how we want things to look or how we want things to be, but parking is such an issue down on Main Street, down here in Plymouth, all over Plymouth. I just don't know how much more growth can this take as far as business. I think if you look at the residential stuff, the parking underneath the buildings, that seems to work. But where is that, where? I mean, it's just everything being right here to focus on this. And the other area that I feel like we need to work on is the process, the application process, the all of that. That seems to be a lot of the buzz when I talk to people about what do you want to see. The application process, all of that seems to be very cumbersome and very discouraging for people and very unclear. I think they just don't get all the information that they can either comprehend or whatever. It takes several trips, and
Well, that's next on the agenda.
it's just, oh, okay, I'll wait.
You know what creates the mix on Main Street or the village commercial zone is that Railroad Square was originally an industrial zone.
Right.
And most of Main Street is grandfathered in one respect or another.
Are there things that jumped out to you as you were on your walk that probably don't fit current zoning? I think one of the things I struggle with, I'm all for rules and creating new rules, but I really struggle with, I don't know if we or the town is really enforcing the current rules that are on the books. So I struggle with just the solution being creating new rules all the time if we're not enforcing what's there. Throughout the town, this isn't just downtown, this is throughout the town. So I'll just say that. The other thing that I think would really help downtown, and I think if you go and you look at the main part of Main Street, all the the electricity, you can't see it. You go down to the southern part of town and there's telephone after telephone pole coming up through old rotting sidewalks. And I don't know if there's a way, June, through zoning to address those types of issues, because I think long term, right, we want that area of town to be the thing that attracts other people to come to town. And I think as you go further and further south on Main Street, it becomes less and less appealing, just from my personal perspective. And I don't know if there's things we can do to help address that in the future.
We did talk some about that in our walk, in terms of the incredibly long curb cuts, making it really not very walkable.
And like you said, the back, like there's that one, what was a gas station at one point or convenience store that now has all of that parking that just cuts out all that sidewalk on that side. And
Yeah.
And there is history on that site in particular, if I may just, because where that parking in between the laundry and what used to be the 7-Eleven, there actually were gas pumps in there.
yeah.
And there's 2 lots, so that one that's really open could be sold and a building could be built there, so that would, I was
just thinking about the scale of development and whether or not downtown can manage more development. There is the parking issue, which does need to be addressed somehow, and obviously we're not going to address that tonight in any meaningful way. But I mean, if we look historically at Plymouth, it was pretty dense, the downtown, with tall buildings, like D&M still exists, and there were a lot more of them. Where the post office is now, after just until the post office got built in the 1930s, was a pretty good sized building there, with retail on the first floor, and that doesn't mean we have to do the same exact thing again. But I mean, historically, Plymouth has actually had a pretty grand scale of development. We're on a kind of lower side of it in some ways right now, and there are logistical issues to solve there. And if we do want to encourage that about parking and such, but it has been maintainable in the past in different circumstances. But
I just want to respond to his concern about the utility wires. We really wanted to get them underground, and it just wasn't possible with the grants and the funding and the cost of the project, and we were disappointed.
Yeah, I guess I could just add to that the work that eventually will get done downtown, the timeline's still up in the air for a variety of reasons, but it was a stormwater drainage project and a water and sewer project. There's 2 different things, and it's not to address, unfortunately, it wasn't written to bring in putting the wires underground for economic development purposes and adding streetscaping and that kind of thing. And if it had, the cost would have gone up quite a bit, and it's already quite costly. So, and the town has to pay at least 20%. So adding in another $100,000, you're adding in quite a bit each time of that 20%, so that at some point the towns can only afford so much so far, not to say we can't make that as a goal, in 20 years or something, or have something done before the next paving. But it will have a new road surface, it will have new sidewalks, and I think that will help give definition, because everything is in such disrepair down there. So knowing that this was coming, there just hasn't been any investment made. So, in a couple of years it'll look different, but we're still gonna have the poles and wires. And, we could have been nice to get it.
Becca's going to start a fundraiser to take care of that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just really expensive,
Thanks.
and we have, other needs for it, across town, sort of, so.
Rebecca.
I just want to get back to the form-based code, because I think it sounds like, to me, it sounds like it makes a lot of sense for the downtown area, because for the most part, we're dealing with existing structures, and the uses, the table of uses sometimes just gets, it doesn't always seem to fit with different things that pop up, and I think we run into, a lot of, like when we had the virtual reality Froyo place.
Oh yeah.
That, it's like, is that indoor recreation? Like, what is that? But really trying to, look through this table of uses to try and figure out where this fits in an existing building that really the only changes were going to happen were, the Froyo line and like the private VR room or whatever that was. Anyway, to me, I would like to look more into form-based code if we're talking about how to work within the village commercial district, because taking into account what kind of spurred this to begin with was the idea of greater than 6 unit multi-dwelling units, And, you know, we have a good opportunity for increased housing in Plymouth that has available parking, and not trying to zone the entire downtown based on the needs of one property owner or the potential of one building. But really, you know, if it's not gonna impact parking and it's really an existing structure, you know, why wouldn't we allow for something like that?
Would you like us to get more information about it, and we can talk about it in more detail? Be better prepared to explain what it is and have some diagrams and things, because it is very visual, so I think that's what and we can give you some resources before the next meeting on June 2nd. In a week, we'll get some stuff together, give you some resources to look at prior to the next meeting. How's
That would be
sound?
wonderful.
Okay.
We have talked about it before, but it's been a little while.
My only other question is, we had talked at some point about also going the other direction within the Village Commercial on perhaps a more brief site walk, and I wonder if anyone would be interested in that.
Particular sidewalk?
No, in our walk a couple of weeks ago, we mostly went south from here, and we didn't really go north very far, or at all really.
Should.
And it would be, I think, a shorter walk, but it could be an opportunity to check out the other third, I guess it is, or so, of the Village Commercial.
It's a good idea.
Is it fair to introduce something near Tenny Mountain Highway regarding a need for a sidewalk?
I think that would be a whole other discussion, and that
Yeah.
might
I'd
even
like
be
to
a
somehow
select board
get to
discussion.
that.
Can we get through finishing the downtown thing? And then, so
Sure.
if you want to try to do that, maybe, let's see what the weather's going to look like, and maybe for the second we can meet here to start, go over a few things, and then end with a shorter walk out there, okay, if the weather looks good.
Okay.
The only other, can I add one thing about the
Yes, please.
downtown walk? I just do want to recognize that we were, with some permission, walking on some private properties there. So if, you know, it's fun, we go out and, you know, walk around, and it's fun to sort of see, but I do want to respect that part of what we were, especially down behind Main Street, below Main Street on what we kind of call Railroad Square, you know, that's very undefined. While it looks like there's a road through there and it kind of functions like a road, we are on private property in that space. So if you go through there to explore again or something, it's a little, I don't think the owner, you know, would have an issue, or owners, because of the way the space functions. But that to me is somewhat of an issue for the town, because people do cut through there walking or driving and use it as an access, and not everybody has an easement through there. And the planning board, you know, really technically we don't have the right to go on private property unless it's related to an application. You know, when somebody submits a subdivision or a site plan review application, they actually sign on the application form. We give the permission, but state law allows us to do, you know, to have that right to go look at a site to review it. So I just want to make that comment, that we have to remember it's a little bit uncertain there where all the boundaries are, so it's not as clear as, you know, but you don't have the right to just go walking around on people's properties.
Thank
Just
you.
wanted to clarify that.
And in everyone's packets as well, kind of on that, not really on that topic, but there is a handout related to the MTAG, or Municipal Technical Assistance Grant. So while the board is thinking about, you know, takeaways, and if there are areas that, you know, there's interest in exploring further, there are sources of funding out there, you know, which can, for example, be used to procure a form-based code specialist, things like that. In some cases, these are no match required. So if the board were interested in even just learning more, of course, it's, you know, these things would still be ultimately up to the people of Plymouth, the board, and others. But, you know, there are ways that people could be pulled in, consultants or specialists, to sort of assist with parts of that process, and through one, you know, funding source or another. The MTAG is a particularly established one, and Plan NH is a pretty, you know, well-established organization. But that is something that can be considered going forward if there were some, you know, if you wanted someone to come in and do an assessment of what areas might exist for, you know, looking at changes or tweaks, or adding form-based elements, or how we could complement a specific area or a specific zone of town.
Thank you, Joseph. Appreciate that. Okay, item B is site plan review regulations, and the potential we've been discussing, not in great depth yet, but the potential of revisions to our site plan review regulations. And I have to say, one thing that occurs to me, like after tonight's meeting, is I wonder if there's a way to streamline, in terms of subdivisions, like minor subdivisions, and also in terms of site plans, some of these minor site plans, I'm not sure what the word would be there, but somebody that where we don't check all the boxes and we have to use our discretion to say, well, and I wonder about that sometimes.
So do we.
Yeah.
This is another good way to put it. So we have been working a bit on the site plan review regulations, not maybe as much effort because of these applications and other things going on, but still trying to make a little bit of headway. So we wanted to just kind of quickly, tonight give you two handouts that we've been looking at. So one aspect, and I gave you some slides before, I didn't put it together that way, but one piece of our regulations is more kind of administrative, and a big chunk of that that's really key is kind of what we call currently in our regulations the scope of review and when site plan review applies. So right now it's basically any addition or building over 100 square feet, which is like 10 by 10, I mean small. And I think there's times when that's too small, and we should be looking more at what are the impacts of that. The application you dealt with tonight for site plan review was a fairly good sized addition, but the impact of it isn't so great. So we've been talking about this a lot, kind of balancing of what if you did require an engineered drawing that was going to cost, a lot of time and money for something like that? What's the purpose of that? What are you going to gain? What are you going to see on that drawing that is going to change or really influence a decision one way or another? And to me, that's more of a way of sort of a threshold of looking at it. Like, what are the impacts? What's really happening here? However, things do come out. Like when we talked about the new car, it wasn't a huge addition, but it's a pretty visual change, because they're tearing off a piece of the building and rebuilding it is what they're proposing. But with that, there was some drainage concerns and knowledge that you have of problems in the existing drainage system there, and because they are putting in a roof drain, that triggers water flowing. So when we looked at this other one at the Tenny Mountain store, we were realizing there's no culverts there, the drainage just is there, and it's impervious surface now, you're just changing it to be a structure where it's basically pavement and hard packed gravel now, so it's not really functioning as any major change to drainage there. So this seems somewhat appropriate. I mean, obviously there were some details, we'll get that worked out, but what do you need to make a decision, I guess, is sort of part of that question of applications. I do think, when we hear, and I'd be curious to hear more about what, people, why they think it's so cumbersome. I feel like we do a lot in the office staff time to help people get through making our the application we've updated, it's now digital, and I think it's a bit more clear, but we still need to have information from people to prepare and for you guys to make a decision. So that's that balance of getting enough detail but not being overly burdened. However, to me, stormwater, changing topography, filling, regrading, clearing, really moving dirt around is another sort of level of understanding what kind of changes and impacts that has on the neighbors is different than the addition on the small engine repair barn, the addition that you're seeing dealt with tonight. So, so in our regulations now, there's a section on scope of review. So similar to what we had done with the zoning, and this is just a real first cut at it. We're not necessarily asking you to get into this tonight. This was based on us looking at a variety of other
You have an extra one, Joe?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't get you one. Like, without necessarily getting into, again, saying yes or no to this tonight, we're trying to give a little bit of clarity about what triggers site plan review. So the darker blue box, the proposal sort of side, trying to give some clarity by, saying when there's sort of a change of use or expansion, except when, it's already a permitted use, there's no real impact on the floor, the area of the building or parking, no major changes, to grading, landscaping. So similar to what we saw tonight. But then the second part, what is that? Do you want to set a size that triggers? I think, 100 square feet's too small. I just picked 1,000. I don't know. I mean, so again, take this home, think about it. We're going to be asking you to really giving you multiple versions of these types of things as we go through the regulations on this. Modifications to previously approved site plans. In essence, that's what you were looking at tonight. You had a previously approved site plan. It was a little confusing. I can understand how the applicant maybe misinterpreted what we were really requiring. So we can work on explaining that. But one thing that a lot of communities now have, commercial scale solar or wind projects, which we don't really address. So that might be a good one to add. Any filling of the floodplain, you'd want to know that, because again, it can have some impacts on neighboring properties in particular. And then, kind of keeping a catch-all of when we really see something that's substantially changing, quantitatively, allow us to make that determination. If we say, yes, it's required, they can come in and say, no, we don't think we need to do it, like the electric co-op did, right? So I think we're trying to work with people on it and have good explanations. Some communities do set an exempt, a minor threshold, and a major threshold, but in reviewing that, it suddenly becomes like 4 pages or 3 pages to try to determine. Some communities have a technical review committee that can deal with smaller, scale ones, but that's like, you still have to do abutter notices, you still have to go through the process. So I would rather, I think for Plymouth, it's better to do it publicly and just, it either is or it isn't, rather than having some other group make a decision a little bit more, because we still would have to notice those meetings and, if you're going to go through all that, you might as well just do it here, in my opinion. But it's easier, it's clearer. It's not like, well, there's this meeting and then there's that meeting. And, that works in communities when they're seeing like 10 applications a month or something.
I guess, just to push the other direction a little bit on this,
Yeah.
I was just kind of wondering, not about having a separate committee, but I mean, could there be a threshold where below that, we still do want to talk to you. We still think it's important to have a meeting, but maybe the process could be a little bit more of an expedited process with, like we did in practice this evening, but actually kind of make that more something written out. Like it can be an expedited process for a more minor plan, but we still want to meet you and have this discussion publicly because we think it's important. Is that just too complicated? Or
No, but there's a point where by statute, by state law, we're required to do public notice.
Yeah.
It has to be put in the newspaper, have to post it. We have to send out abutter notices. So that's what really triggers a lot of work for us, and it kind of formalizes that process. So you're either having a very conceptual, like, this is what I'm thinking of, this is what I want to do, but as soon as you really start drawing out something, and it kind of goes to what we can call preliminary review, we have to notify abutters. And that's state, that's not our law, our rule, that's state statute. So where that line is, we do a lot of conceptual review, design review discussions, just inform, that kind of falls on us. You guys don't always see that. I think we give good information, but,
no, I wonder about the one tonight though. Like if I was in a butter, would I want to know about this business basically doubling in size in terms of its footprint? I might.
and they were notified.
Yeah, and at the same time, I look at the applicant and say, he might not have the full engineering drawings and everything else that someone else might have, that we're basically waiving for him, but not really doing so in a formalized way.
Yeah.
I could see us doing some sort of tiered thing where it's like, okay, if your impact is, this size, then you have these requirements, and then as it gets bigger, there might be more requirements, so it's still, we're still going through the same process.
Yeah.
But maybe it's, you know, if it's a smaller impact, maybe there are fewer requirements and fewer hoops for
Yeah.
them to jump through to get to stand before us. I don't know.
So in some ways, maybe it becomes more what the application requirements are and the level of detail.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, but again, when I've looked at those checklists, it's kind of like, you know, there should be a title and a scale, so the list
Yeah.
becomes, it's sort of, you know, and you have to understand why. If you don't have that, like, and then a new light pole goes up or a new sign, and you know, it's like, well, why wasn't that put on the plan? So, they can, I think it's better to have a list and then ask them to explain why they don't include it, you know? I mean, that just administratively, kind of trying to work it both ways, you know, but I think when we get to that point in the checklist, we can try to maybe make it a little simpler or break it into, you know, when there's stormwater requirements, you must have a topo plan, you must have engineered, you must have a drainage calculations or something like that.
That makes sense.
I'm trying to think of how, oh, sorry, Neil, go ahead.
We always used to figure that you need to appropriate 10% of your projected cost for a project for engineering. So if you've got a really small project, your engineering would be a really small investment. But if you got a $10 million building, you're gonna wind up putting 10% into.
Yeah.
Now, we have a minor subdivision and major subdivision. I mean, I guess that's, you know, we're trying to, how does that, I mean, that's just a different application. I'm scanning the subdivision regs right now and I'm trying.
It's the same application, it's just, we would require more details, and the threshold is really, I think it's over 3 lots or whenever there's a new road.
Yeah.
So then you're gonna get into a whole lot of engineering, you know, and by law, it has to be done by a surveyor, the subdivision plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, so that's an expense that, again, you can't file a subdivision plan that isn't stamped by a surveyor, so they've gotta prepare it anyway.
Yeah. So I guess that's what I was, you know,
Yeah.
similar, you know, a minor site plan review,
Yeah.
majors.
We actually were been talking about it this past week and even today, you know, like, and looking at how other towns are approaching it, I find it a lot more complicated to
Yep.
do it that way. I think so personally. And I first read it, I was like, oh, this looks great, you know, and some example from another town or some model ordinances we were looking at. And then you get into it, it's like, I don't know which category this, you know, because there's everyone, you can always find one, well, is it that or that, you know, and who decides? So I think our process, you know, maybe because, I don't know, we're the ones that administer, we think it works pretty well, but this board gets through things pretty quickly. You know, we have a lot of conditions. If anything, I'd like to see put more time limits on how long conditions are, you know, with something to work on to help us, because we have a lot of things sitting on the shelf down there that are gonna expire in December, and I've been writing to the applicants, and I'm sure the economy and everything is, you know, uncertain, and supplies, and people are running into, you know, availability of contractors to do site work and the cost or whatever, but at some point, they get to do it or not, you know?
I say, would it be helpful also to have more concrete terms of what, in our conditions that is, not necessarily in our regulations, what is active and substantial development that we're looking for? Would that be something to put in conditions more? Or
That would
not?
be helpful, yeah, it's hard to define, you know, at times, but what is, yeah, is it X percent or, you know, when they're, percent of what, you know? Is tree clearing enough? No. Personally, I think when you start to see like equipment brought in and, you know, not just logging equipment and then removed, but, you know, real digging in the ground starts to,
Concrete being poured.
yeah, you know, moving material around, when you start to see site changes besides logging, because that could, you know, we're an agricultural forested state, that happens everywhere, you know, that has a different sort of set of rules to it too. But when you start taking the stumps out and regrading and moving things around, then you're impacting stormwater runoff, potentially opening up the site to erosion, you know. That's sort of like what how do you need to have erosion controls in, silt fence, you know? If those aren't there, then what's going on?
Changes the hydrology.
Exactly, yeah. So that to me is like, you know, setting those when you're not seeing that level of kind of work being done, then it's not really active and substantial. But,
You have to have a permit to cut timber.
yeah.
The state enforces state regulations in forestry.
And we don't require site plan review for harvesting, you know, of timber on any site, so.
Okay, so we've got some work to do going
Yep,
forward.
and so on that end too, you want to hand out this one?
Yeah.
So Joseph did a similar thing for building design, and again, this is just, we're starting to look at the design, sorry to keep tracking this out. Again, this handout is very preliminary, we're not going to go into the details of it tonight, but it kind of follows a little bit of what we were talking about, somewhat form-based code, that kind of thing, it's somewhat related to that. So Joseph had looked at, again, this format of what we currently have for sort of building design, combining other review of, you know, what we see in other places that can be done, how we have revised that to try to determine, you know, what we might suggest as design guidelines. So we're working on this showed you a little bit about landscaping before. Stormwater's the big one to work on, and starting to get into that a little bit, but it's more complex because there's just there's some stormwater design guidelines, especially in communities that are permitted for stormwater by EPA, which we are not, you know, that are very complex and, you know, have.
Any project that is 1 acre in size or part of a project that's over 1 acre requires a stormwater pollution prevention plan, which is EPA.
Yep, and then, but there's, within what they call MS4 communities down in southern tier of New Hampshire have another whole level of really looking at the water quality coming off of every site and making sure it's treated or retained and, you know, so,
Turbidity.
yeah.
I have a question, not to get lost in the details, but like, in areas of higher density development, the recommended setback is no more than that of the adjacent building with the greater setback. And if our zoning ordinance said otherwise, or do we need to change our zoning ordinance then?
Yeah, potentially. So this is, again, a draft, so we can, you know.
I
Yeah.
like the idea, but I'm just
Right.
kind of,
And that is what's currently there in the site, that provision is already in the site plan review, so that is, you know,
Okay.
that, as well the height, it's, you know, in areas of higher density development, the recommended minimum height is no less than the lower of the adjacent buildings, so there are some things in the building design guidelines of the site plan review, you know, regulations where, you know, there's that, you know, that point where, you know, the zoning versus the site plan review, and this is more, you know, to get the, you know, the quality of development. And a part of it is, you know, it's just a note on it too, is, you know, just more text doesn't necessarily mean more requirements. It may actually kind of be the opposite in terms of, you know, it provides more specifics, because it already is within the site plan review regulations that the board should review exterior materials. But, you know, there's a possibility of, by adding more text, you're not necessarily adding more requirements, you're just saying
You're
what
clarifying.
actually it is. Yeah, giving more specificity to the applicant about what will the board look at when they review for exterior materials.
thank you.
So that's kind of what's being presented here mostly is that sort of, you know, question. And if the board, you know, or this is not to say, you know, proposing tonight that we should adopt, you know, you must have pop-outs every 40 feet on the front facade of the building, but it is just saying, you know, an idea of, we can specify of what the board reviews when looking at colors and textures of walls or roofs and exposed structural members, or don't have to, you know, it's not currently specified, it's just currently kind of left up to interpretation a bit.
Yeah. And the last page has some pictures that, again, this is an example of how some communities have done it, and what we were thinking is we would try to find some pictures that are more Plymouth context. Again, we're looking for guidance from you, so this is a handout for you to think about. Of course, it's a small board tonight, so I miss this. we can email it around.
So we're gonna dig into this more. In the
Yeah, and all the sort of standards. We're just trying to show you where we're headed with this, and we're gonna have a lot more homework for you guys to do as we ask you to review it.
Thank you.
And if this format, you'd rather see, give some we worked well, I think, for the zoning piece, so we're looking at, kind of adjusting it here, and then we'll figure out how we fit it back into the regulations going forward.
All right. So, capital improvement program committee update. I guess we're probably not going to have that tonight, unless June, you have any comments? As Phil's not here, and get guys in the committee too now, and he's not here either.
Yeah, just quickly, we met last Friday, and we're not going to meet next Friday because of the holiday week, coming into the holiday weekend. We're giving departments a little bit more time till June 22nd, I think is the date, to really gather information about their capital needs. We've been working with several departments in this new sort of spreadsheet format that Joseph had developed that's pretty exciting to look at, and adding within each sort of worksheet, each department will have something and it's going to feed into a master spreadsheet. But we're at a point, we're kind of figuring out sort of the committee's charge, really, which this board adopted at the last meeting, I think it was, and then giving time to the departments. So we have been meeting so far with the library, Pemmy Baker TV, police department, fire department, recycling center next week, highway soon. It's bringing up a lot of questions of what is a capital cost and how the town has been addressing some things department by department, and kind of starting to think, is there more of an economy of scale for phone systems? I guess the police department, but there's other different needs. Police department phone communication systems different than planning department. So in terms of security and tracking, and dispatch and all that, obviously, but just. And what are our facility needs too? We've had some discussion about that, because not everybody's an expert of when the next roofing job needs to happen on the library or the town hall, or that kind of stuff. So good discussions from the board or the committee on that, and we're making some headway with it, but waiting to get more information from departments, and then we can really begin some analysis on it, with the goal of by end of September to have something so the budget committee and select board can use the information for the budget for next year.
That's great.
Item D, Riverside Landing.
I'll keep this one real quick.
Okay.
Last week, it's been busy. We actually had the closing on the conservation easements, the 2 conservation easements, and the walking trail easement. So those have all been signed. The town did get a $5,000 donation for each easement, so $10,000 total that is going to be held in a separate accounts for each parcel to deal with any issues of monitoring the easement going forward, or any enforcement that might need to be happening. So finally got through that, and that was the conservation easements in particular were really tied to their wetlands permit. So they've whether we're going to see some work done there or not, we still need to get the development agreement in place and money set aside for some construction inspection. And I've had several meetings with the developer, and we've been talking about that. But so he knows what he has to do, but hasn't done it yet. So again, timelines would be helpful.
It's been a long time.
Yes, but I feel like, again, the town has done its job to move things along, and there was some, we can have disagreements
Very
about that, but it's
complicated.
very complicated. There was a lot of discussion about the easements, but I have emails, they're ready to go. We're ready to, so we finally got there, which
Conservation
is good.
Commission's very happy.
Yeah, so we got those, they're done, they're recorded at the registry, so
Yeah, the
one step at a time.
Yeah, Conservation Commission is working on more plans.
So.
Is the building envelope that they came and applied for complete? Didn't they come in and determine they wanted to expand out to the east of
Yeah,
that,
so
past the bank? Is that work done?
No, it hasn't even begun, and that's any changes in the fill and moving dirt around in that area east of Bank of New Hampshire and the Fairfield Inn, that has not started yet because they hadn't met all the conditions of the wetlands permit, which is kind of the conservation easements, and we do have, so that, again, was like
You have
working
the
all that
wetlands
out,
plan.
and how, I think in February, the select board agreed to the conservation easements, and the developer knew that, but we didn't get them signed till last week.
They have the wetlands permit now,
They've had it with a whole bunch of conditions, including those two easements.
and they're met.
I'm not gonna
Oh, you're not
determine,
sure?
you know, I don't, that's for DES to determine all the other
Oh.
conditions. You know, there's a lot of signage and silt fence, you know, before they start, they have to put in a lot of erosion control devices and that kind of stuff, so. DES can enforce their permit, you know, our job within that was to work with the applicant on these easements, and we did that. The select board, I think, early February approved them, and we finally just got them signed in early May, so we were ready to go with them, and so, anyway, it's all, you know, again, one step at a time, moving along.
Right.
Many emails about it.
Yeah. Lifetime.
All right, so getting close. I'd like to open the meeting to public comments. Anybody has any comments? Frank?
Frank Miller, and I'm responding to that letter that I gave to the town planner. The reason that what generated that was twofold. I did the parking inventory in the village commercial zone in 2000. I've been on the planning board, economic development board, parking committees for the last 40 years. And on the economic development side, when you inventory your existing structures, you use the North American Industry Classification Guide. That is a reference of what business describes a business. There's a 6-digit code that goes to that. So if you're going to start a business, you're going to file with the Secretary of State, you're going to fill out that form and put in that 6-digit code, because your insurance programs are all key to that. The description of your industry, specifically what you do and what you don't do, is in that 6-digit code. So in order to look and evaluate the effectiveness of a business Main Street, you want to have a balance of certain types of businesses. Obviously, if we had a town that was nothing but insurance and lawyer offices, it'd be rather unique, but it'd probably be a very quiet town. You have to have a mix of different types of businesses to provide the appropriate traffic flow of customers, people doing business. There are systems that you use to evaluate your existing structure and then look at to see what you're missing as to determine how you could expand on that and whether or not you have the appropriate infrastructure available to do that. On the parking system, I did the inventory, and we are short, by the number of businesses, we are short around 250 spots for the village commercial zone. One of the issues that I did, I mapped out the area of the downtown village commercial zone. Now there's two different descriptions. The village commercial zone is site specific, it has its own description. The downtown area includes 6 zones. Okay, it includes the agricultural, village commercial, single-family residential, multifamily residential, civic institution, and highway commercial. That's the downtown area. Now, when you're trying to do one item, parking, you have all these variables on dimensional aspects of trying to get the parking to comply with our town ordinance. So one of the issues I did is I generated the map and gave a map to the town planning, the university's police force, and our own, so that when we have a parking meeting, we are all talking about the same dimensions in the same area and understanding what effect any parking changes have on any part of this downtown area. That was what that was, and also we were looking towards economic development. So we have a list of what we have. What we need to look at is what are we missing, and that's how you establish. You have to look at what you have first. Another thing, a point of interest, all your infrastructure code systems. The first system to come in to the national code system was the electrical code, which was in 1897. Your fire code started in 1914. The sanitation code started in 1918 and 20. Your road codes, vehicle codes, didn't start until 1925. Needless to say, our Main Street was already here. In 1900, literally 98% of all of the buildings on the down Main Street, Village Commercial Zone, our Main Street so-called, were all owned, operated, or connected with the railroad company, railroad system. We were a major timber tourist town. Two things shut that down. Was one, in 1910, the Weeks Act came along to establish the national forest, cut off the logging. And then in 1938, the flood modified Green Street. There were 14 tracks wide on Green Street before that flood. So a major change. But we have right now an incomplete infrastructure system, and I'll give you an example. You kids go down to the skateboard park. Someone gets injured, they call up 911. Their answer, where's your location? We don't know, we're on unnamed way. That road is called unnamed way. It never got a name. There's no number. Okay? What people call Railroad Square was just that. It was all the area in that square area. But the road they're actually standing on when we were walking was 5 points. So the problem is, even some of our names to our ways need to be reviewed and brought up to date before you can talk about any other structural elements. If you can't describe where you're standing, you've got an issue. So I have a lot of the history of Plymouth, and I've been on committees, and as an engineer, I do all the research back to 1900, whenever, to see what was existing and what caused to make what we have the way it is, and then how do we bring that up to date, up to code, and make it a complete function within our Main Street area. I have other information, and if sometime I have an office above Chase Street, and if I invite any one of you guys to come over and take a peek, it might be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Frank, can you give us some contact information?
Is it in contact?
Yeah.
Well, I don't have computers. I am a book kind. So I just have a cell phone number.
What's that?
Let's get that after the meeting.
Okay,
That'll be
all right.
Yeah, I'll get that later, but, yeah.
You don't want that on public record. You don't want that on public record.
Millions of people watching right now.
Okay, I will close the public comments and entertain.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I
Opposed? Meeting adjourned at 8:27.